The airport buzzed with the kind of strange daytime quiet only Christmas Eve could create, half empty, half hopeful, and fully wrapped in a hush that felt like the world was holding its breath. Yet amid all that gentle stillness was a man whose world was anything but calm. Arvin Cole, one of the youngest self-made CEOs in the country, marched through Terminal C with the polished coldness of someone who had forgotten what softness felt like. His assistant had quit that morning. His father had left another angry voicemail about family duty, and his private jet malfunctioned, forcing him onto a commercial flight like everyone else. He hated the world for making him sit among strangers, but he hated the empty feeling inside him even more, an emptiness he blamed on work, timing, destiny, everything except himself. And then came the moment that would unravel him from the inside out. A small hand tugged gently on his sleeve as he stood in the plane aisle, lost in his own noise, and a tiny voice said, "Mr. Mom said lonely people need friends. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel Stories of Kindness. Your support helps us spread more heart-touching stories." Arvin blinked down, startled, meeting the large, curious eyes of a little boy wearing a knitted yellow sweater and holding a stuffed star with floppy arms. The boy's sandy hair stuck up like a halo, and he stared at the CEO with the simple, bold concern of someone too young to understand the walls adults build. The plane was flooded with soft winter sunlight through the oval windows, dusting everything in gold, and in that glow, the boy's innocence felt even sharper. Arvin had no idea why such a sentence, just 8 simple words, hit him so hard. Maybe it was the word lonely, because something about it echoed in a place he had tried to mute for years. The boy giggled as if he knew a secret. His name, Arvin later learned, was Jaden Merrin, a 7-year-old who was flying alone for the first time since his mother couldn't get off work early. Though the flight attendants watched him carefully, Jaden seemed to attach himself to Arvin the moment they took off, gravitating toward the only unfriendly-looking person in the entire row. Arvin tried to focus on his laptop, burying his irritation under the pretense of a man too busy for human connection, but Jaden kept sneaking glances, his small chin propped on the armrest, his thumb tracing the edge of the stuffed star he called Nova. The boy had an aura of gentle persistence that even Arvin's hardened exterior couldn't repel. Finally, unable to ignore him, Arvin sighed and closed his laptop. He expected the boy to shy away. Instead, Jaden smiled so wide it nearly cracked the stiff armor around Arvin's chest. Jaden began telling him about the snow globe he hoped to buy for his mom using his saved lunch money, and how he wanted to surprise her because she worked so much. He talked about Christmas trees, school art projects, and how he believed people who looked sad just needed someone to talk to, because that's what his mom always said. As the boy spoke, his voice soft and earnest, Arvin felt his heart shift, just slightly at first, then enough to sting. No one had asked him about his sadness in years, mostly because he never let anyone close enough to see it. Outside the aircraft window, the sky was a clear, endless blue, stretching out in calm sheets like an ocean turned upside down. The sunlight cast a warm glow over Jaden's cheeks, making him look almost angelic. In contrast, Arvin felt grey, cold, and empty. The boy seemed to sense that, leaning a little closer, clutching Nova to his chest, as though offering silent companionship. It was bewildering to Arvin, a child reaching out to him, a man who couldn't even remember the last time he'd reached out to anyone. As Jaden talked, Arvin found something loosening inside him, a laugh he didn't know he still had, a softness he thought he'd buried. But beneath that fragile warmth was a deeper ache. For the first time in years, Arvin felt undeniably human, painfully aware of the loneliness he had sworn he didn't feel. The flight hit like turbulence, just a brief tremble, but Jaden stiffened with fear. He clutched Arvin's sleeve again, his knuckles white, his eyes wide. Without thinking, Arvin placed one steady hand on the boy's shoulder, murmuring something reassuring he didn't even plan. The boy relaxed instantly, leaning into the warmth of someone who, despite his polished suit and intimidating face, had chosen to protect him in that moment. It made Arvin realize something uncomfortable. He had spent years building a mountain of achievements, yet none of them felt as real or meaningful as comforting a child he'd just met. The flight smoothed out, and Jaden grew sleepy, his head bobbing until finally he drifted off, resting against Arvin's arm. Arvin tried to remain stiff, but the small, trusting weight of the boy settled into him like a quiet truth he'd long avoided. He wasn't cold, he was lonely. He wasn't heartless, he was hurting. As Jaden slept peacefully, Arvin watched the sun outside, its rays cutting through the clouds like golden threads, weaving a path he had forgotten existed. When the landing announcement finally came, Arvin didn't want the moment to end. For 2 hours he had felt something he hadn't felt in years, connection. Jaden stirred, blinking up at him with sleepy gratitude. When the plane landed and people began standing, Jaden tugged Arvin's hand again and said something that shattered him in a way he didn't expect. "You know, Mr. Nobody should spend Christmas alone. Mom says it makes your heart tired." The words were spoken softly, not as advice but as a simple truth, and they hit Arvin harder than any boardroom loss or financial crisis ever had. He wanted to answer, but his throat tightened. He wanted to explain how his work had swallowed his holidays, how he'd forgotten what warmth felt like, how loneliness didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, like frost spreading across a window. But all he managed was a small nod. When they reached the terminal, Arvin assumed Jaden would run into the arms of a waiting family member. Instead, he saw a woman rushing in late, a woman with exhaustion in her eyes, but relief flooding her face the moment she spotted Jaden. Her name was Mara Merrin. She wrapped her son tightly, apologizing breathlessly for being delayed at the hospital where she worked long shifts to support them. Jaden proudly lifted Nova and said, "Mom, this is my new friend. He helped me not be scared." Mara's grateful eyes lifted to Arvin, softening with sincere warmth. She thanked him with a depth that made Arvin feel undeserving. He wasn't a hero. He was merely a lonely man who happened to be on the same flight. But to Jaden, he had been exactly what he needed. As Mara hugged her son again, Arvin felt something tug inside him, a mix of longing and regret. He envied the simplicity of their love, the bond made from shared struggles and genuine tenderness. It struck him that despite all his success, he had no one waiting for him. No one running across a terminal with open arms, no one whose world brightened at his arrival, just meetings, deadlines, and an empty penthouse drenched in silence. Arvin turned toward the exit, forcing himself to walk away, but Jaden's voice stopped him. "Mr. Arvin!" the boy called, bounding toward him with small but determined steps. "I forgot something." Arvin turned just as Jaden pressed Nova, the little plush star, into his hands. "This is for you," Jaden said proudly, "so you don't feel lonely when the plane goes home without me." Arvin froze, his heart fracturing and healing all at once. The stuffed star was old, worn, clearly loved. It was not just a toy, it was comfort made tangible. Jaden's most precious thing, and he was giving it to him. For a moment, Arvin couldn't speak. His voice wouldn't cooperate. He finally managed a quiet, "Thank you," but it sounded too small for the magnitude of the moment. Jaden grinned, then ran back to his mother, waving enthusiastically until they disappeared into the crowd. Arvin stood there long after they were gone, holding Nova tightly, feeling the warmth of connection lingering like sunlight on winter skin. He realized then that the world wasn't as cold as he had made it. He had simply built walls too high to see over. The boy had shown him a way through, a way he didn't know he still wanted. On the drive home, Arvin didn't open his laptop. He didn't take calls. He didn't think about meetings, numbers, or deadlines. He only thought about a child who understood loneliness better than most adults and chose kindness anyway. He found himself smiling softly, almost imperceptibly, but it was a start. When he reached his luxurious penthouse, instead of the usual emptiness, he felt a spark of warmth. He placed Nova gently on the center table, the tiny plush star facing the window where daylight still spilled in. For the first time in years, Arvin didn't feel completely alone. Something in him shifted that day, a promise to try harder, to let people in, to give himself permission to feel. A week later, Arvin found himself standing outside the hospital where Mara worked. He didn't come with a grand plan. He didn't bring expensive gifts or flashy offers. He came simply because he wanted to return the kindness that had changed him. Inside the pediatric wing, he found Mara and Jaden delivering gifts to sick children. Jaden lit up the moment he saw him, rushing toward him with bright joy that melted the last remnants of Arvin's icy walls. "You came back!" Jaden shouted, hugging him with childlike certainty, as though he always believed Arvin would. And in that instant, Arvin realized something life-changing. Some connections don't need time to form, they just need truth. Over the next months, Arvin became a regular visitor at the hospital, sponsoring programs for children, funding medical supplies, and offering help quietly without fanfare. But for him, the true reward was the friendship that blossomed between him, Jaden, and Mara, a small, unexpected family built not from blood but from kindness. He found himself celebrating birthdays, learning to bake cookies with Jaden, helping Mara fix her car, and feeling, for the first time in his life, part of something genuine. And every time he walked into their modest home, Jaden would proudly point at the framed photo he took of Arvin holding Nova and say, "That's the day you stopped being lonely." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories of Kindness. Your engagement helps us bring more emotional stories to you. Special request, please comment, kindness lives on if you believe even small acts can change someone's life. And with that, Arvin finally understood what Jaden had said on that quiet Christmas Eve flight. Lonely people don't need perfection, success, or wealth. They need friends. Sometimes small hands heal the biggest wounds, and sometimes the simplest words spoken by a child become the beginning of someone's second chance at life.